All right. Let's see if this is gonna work. Guessing it probably will. Got the cordless mic on the camera, and got some people who were alerting me my volume was down. Sure enough, the audio input on my computer was way off. How it got there, I haven't a clue, but learn as you go, right? When you're a solo team, you learn by trial and error. So, this is what I like to do when I can with the people is that's a good place to find some shed antlers right here. I like to set the camera up a ways away from me so you can see all around me. See where I am. Watch the forest, right? I'm guessing this microphone should work. It looks like I'm about 25 meters from the camera, I'm guessing. Let's see if this works. Now, what did I just do? I got up early and went for a big hike. And went to a trail, and I had 4 trail cameras there from last November. And I got them. It's a big black wolf on one of them. It makes me angry. Damn wolves. You just can't, it's impossible to get rid of them all, but you got to stay on top of them. There's a lot of new fawns on the camera. That's a good thing. Now, totally unprepared. I got to, I don't have that much time. I have to get out of here and go back into town, shower, change, go to a wedding. I don't even know if I got enough time to do this, but whatever. Let's get into an email that we haven't read. It looks like a fairly long one. Did I read this? Pictures look familiar, though. All right, here we go. It's marked as unread, but the pictures looked familiar. Let's get into it. Unless I probably looked at them before, obviously. Whatever, here we go. And yes, I'm right in the zone where these people frequent, just so you know. I'm in the Sea to Sky region of British Columbia. Quick story of myself, I'm 60 years old and I grew up in western Montana. I became an Eagle Scout back when it meant knowing how to survive in the wilderness instead of being PC. I grew up in a logging family and my father had the biggest logging outfit in western Montana in the 70s. I've hunted, fished, and trapped since I was a small child. No exaggeration. I'm more comfortable in the woods by myself than anywhere else. I've had grizzly bears false charge me, chased mountain lions and black bears out of my home's backyard. I worked and played in the woods all my life. To say I'm comfortable in the woods and around wild animals is an understatement. The first strange experience happened when I was 6 years old. I was riding in my father's pickup with my brother and mother. We're coming out of a remote area where my family had been camping below my father's logging sale. And all of a sudden, a huge rock came flying off the hillside in front of our vehicle. My dad slammed on the brakes and looked up the hill with a pissed off look. We traveled another couple hundred yards and another big rock flew right in front of us. Okay, this sounds familiar. My dad stopped the vehicle and jumped out, throwing profanities up the hill like only an old-time logger can do. He jumped back in the pickup and said, "Those frickin' kids won't do that again." My mom looked at him and stated, "What the hell would kids be doing 50 miles from nowhere just to throw an impossibly large rock at a pickup?" My dad never answered. The second experience happened in a remote camping trip with my then girlfriend, now wife. I found a nice ridge off a mountain road and pitched my tent. And it was later that night when we were sitting around a campfire and a loud crack occurred approximately 100 yards into the tree line. My 140-pound German Shepherd was acting very nervous and walking in circles around the camp. After a while, I screamed and yelled, but the intermittent crack kept occurring. I was armed with a Chinese AK and shot a couple of rounds into a safe spot, thinking whatever animal it was would get scared and run away. Nothing doing. It kept up with the loud crack, pause, crack, pause, crack. I finally told my to-be wife I was going to sleep since whatever it was keeping its distance, and crawled in my sleeping bag. And needless to say, my wife-to-be was scared shitless and demanded we leave. I got up, packed the camp, and left that night. Looking back, she was probably thinking better than I was. The next occurrence, and the most bizarre, was when I went hunting in the Scapegoat Wilderness with my younger brother and much older cousin from Wisconsin. We hiked approximately 8 miles up McCabe Creek. When we reached the end of the trail, we headed back to the trailhead. A little while later, we saw a nice brown-colored black bear. The bear was approximately 300 yards up the hill from us across a draw. I took my shot using my .300 Weatherby rifle, and the bear disappeared behind some trees. My brother and I then hiked down to the creek and hiked up the opposite side the bear was on. The hill was extremely steep. It was not an easy hike. I found the bear and had to prop it against a tree so it wouldn't roll down the hill as I skinned it. And by the time we hiked back down and back up to the spot I took my shot, our cousin had a good fire going so we could rest in comfort. And all of a sudden we heard a weird high-pitched sound like something flying supersonic overhead. I looked up as the sound went from low to high to low, and it was incredibly loud. And when the scream ended, there was a long, loud growl, and that scared the living shit out of all of us. My older cousin from Wisconsin asked, "What the hell was that?" My brother and I looked confused and answered we had no idea. My cousin freaked and said, "You guys live here and don't know what the hell that was?" "Yep," we answered and cringed at the same time. We then had to hike out of the woods on a very narrow trail in the dark with one flashlight in the direction the scream and growl had came from. We were quite relieved when we reached our pickup. The last experience occurred earlier this year when my wife and I were on our daily hike next to the Clark Fork River near our home. I came across a track that is human-looking, but way too wide. I took a picture of it and posted it on my Facebook. Of course, all my friends had to explain to me what it was: a double-step bear track, an old washed-out bear track, a huge human track, etc., etc. I know what it was. It was not an old double-step human or bear track. Here's the photo of it next to my size 11E boot. Thanks for sharing your experiences about these beings, Steve. It helps a lot. I have experiences I've had throughout my life. It helps explain a lot of experiences I've had throughout my life. Sincerely, Tom Greel, Montana. There you go. There's the print. And I can't hold up the camera. Obviously, you guys are way too far away. And hopefully I remember to put it in the video later on. I don't even know when I'm going to get a chance to put this up, because by the time I get out of here, I'm not going to have much time. I got to get myself clean and look presentable and act normal and be around people. What's this one? Don't know. I read this, didn't I? Energy. Yeah, okay, this is from Anonymous, for the first one. And it's not marked as read. I must have screwed up. You guys are going to have to be patient with me, all right? Because I'm just flying by the seat of my pants here, just randomly and decided to do this, all right? What's this? Hi, Steve. I did my best to describe and explain something I don't fully understand, as well as the knowledge I have collected about it, and the knowledge I gained through it. Here it is, such as it is. It is like trying to explain to people why an intelligent man with a high IQ would pursue a career in professional rodeo. The two look like a contradiction, but they are not mutually exclusive or in conflict, but only appear that way. Okay, read that too. Why am I screwing up? Shit. I'm just scrolling down through my notes, you guys, looking for ones I've missed. And I'd stop the record, right? But I can't. Red. I thought I had a whole bunch that I hadn't read yet. Okay. Well. Red. And this is red. Well, it's kind of cool just to be here in the woods, though, isn't it? Come on, what am I doing? Well, how about this one? Anything in here? All right, here's one. Here's one. Sorry, you guys. There's a million of them in here, right? What's that noise? What happened when we found a dead fox in the driveway? It's the title of this email. I'm not sure if you'd call this a Sasquatch story. I'm sharing this in the hopes it sheds light on and maybe makes you laugh. Just as you get irritated at the branch bangers, otherwise called Bigfoot researchers, my blood pressure goes up whenever I see these ghost hunters running around listening to radio static. I don't know anything about that. And here's the bottom line on people who dabble with Sasquatch or spirits. They're going to screw around until they either run into the real deal or they're going to see just enough to get scared and run back to familiar ground. Ghost hunters all want to have an experience until something unexplainable grabs their mind and won't let go. That's when the person finds out that there's no magic wand to make that kind of attention vanish. It takes work to get your mind back when something tries to eat it, just like it takes work to keep a pissed off bear from stalking you back to camp. There's nothing sadder than watching it dawn into someone's eyes. Once you see the real thing, it sees you too. Spirits and other beings don't ignore trespassers. Life is never the same again, and no one they know will believe a word they say about it. In fact, their lives can be destroyed by being honest. The final insult to injury is there will always be someone who can't see any of it and will beat others down to prove they're right. One of my spiritual mentors warned me, quote, Jesus Christ could come down in the middle of a crowded football stadium and the majority won't see him. They just don't have the perception for it. When you run into people like that, walk away. They'll do anything to cling to their blindness. You've run into that in spades. There'll always be those who seek to kill the truth. The antidote is to live the truth as best you can, and it does my heart good to see you doing that. So what's my story? This is 2010. It started early one morning when I saw a large red fox bound through our backyard and vanish into the driveway. Our land had a high fence and it wasn't easy for wildlife to go through there. Foxes are wily, so I didn't think much of it. Then hubby called me from the driveway. I went out to find hubby standing near a dead fox. It was a lot smaller than the one I saw, and its guts had been ripped out. We looked around and whatever killed it took the guts. There were no flies and it didn't stink yet. Hubby asked me what I thought had killed it. I said I didn't know, but I'd do a search and find out if foxes behave this way. Fast forward 4 hours later, I'd looked online and learned that red foxes will kill juveniles. And I even listened to a recording of the mating cries, just in case I ever heard it. I was thinking I should find some tobacco and say a prayer for the little guy when the driveway alarm went off. I looked at the front camera and there's something in the middle of the sidewalk, most of the way to the front door. It was that dead fox with its head pointed at the front door and its four legs splayed out like he was a little rug. There's no one out there. I checked all the cameras before I went outside. Still no smell, which was odd as it was over 90 degrees that day. I shut my eyes to listen with my whole body and there was nothing. I turned around, slow in a circle, nothing. I put the fox in a snow shovel, then tossed him back to the woods. I remember I did say in a calm, firm voice, "People, this is rude." That night around 2:33 a.m., I woke up convinced something was outside the house. I shut my eyes and listened, nothing. Just the dogs and hubby snoring. I knew sleeping was not going to be possible, so I grabbed my Kindle reader and went downstairs to the living room. I had a little light for the Kindle and didn't bother with the overhead. I got comfortable on the couch and started to read. That's when I heard a tree branch crack up on the hill behind the house. Then came a blood-curdling scream right beside me on the couch in my right ear. At the same time, it felt like a huge pair of hands clamped down on both shoulders and pressed down. That shriek went right through me, and my Kindle went flying across the room, breaking the light. The pressure on my shoulders hung on, I was sitting there trying to breathe when an owl called and it said, "Ooh." My jaw dropped and the words just flew out of my mouth. "Seriously? Your fox effing outside my window and woodsy owl likes to watch?" A voice answered that said, "Come see." I moved to the other end of the couch and the pressure vanished off my shoulders. And I started to sing a song in my mind and got off the couch and minced my way toward the kitchen so I could get to the stairs. As I passed from the living room into the next room, it screamed again. The owl said, "Aw." I heard the noise outside the windows of someone or thing going up the hill into the woods laughing. I went back to bed cussing that I left my Kindle in the living room. I mentioned this event to hubby the next morning and he had a good laugh. Then he ran out to check for tracks and he found the ground disturbed but no prints or broken branches. We went around the outside of the house with a burning bucket of sage and tobacco, thanked whomever for the visit and said we'd appreciate it if they didn't do it again. Then we put it out of our minds. So was it just two foxes with an owl laugh track? That's the trouble getting attached to knowing can backfire. Curiosity, even beauty, will be used as a lure. Was it a forest person? There are those who can use their minds this way if they want to. Was it a spirit? It could have been. Should I have gone outside to find out? Nope. People get mad when I say that. They push me. You have to find out what it was. You have to show people. No, I don't. Forcing people to see these things is harmful. I don't care if they think that's crazy. I've lived with these things my whole life. It would be the same as someone coming up to you and saying, "Steve, I don't believe a grizzly bear ever tried to kill you because I heard you can't track for shit. Prove them all wrong. Take me out there and show me." You might be tempted for a hot minute, but there's just no way. We can laugh about this one now. My husband and I used to camp and hike every chance we got. I'm too sick to do more than sit out in a rocker now, and I thank you for sharing footage of the mountains and woods I miss. A good man gives hope to others. You're a good man. Thank you for giving people a voice and a place to share their experiences about the stigma of ridicule. It's my hope one day that the weird shit I've lived with my whole life will cease to be weird and be embraced as what it is, part of the world we live in. Helicopter right over me. Wow. That's a loud one. Thank you again. Be careful out there and have fun and everyone's crazy auntie. Share if you think it can help. I share it all no matter what, auntie, and I appreciate you big time. Helicopter Central, what the hell? Hope there isn't a fire. You know, as soon as you shared that, I instantly thought of that guy. Remember that guy? He was a Bigfoot guy, researcher, had a channel and shit, and he was going to the woods stuff, and apparently he's found, I never watched any of it, I don't even know who he is, and I'm forgetting his name right now, but he's the guy that got pinned down by whatever it was that pinned him down and absolutely tormented and broke his spirit. Kerry Arnold, that guy, I heard he's a real nice guy, passed away. Did an interview with the guy, and the guy was like breaking down. He was just a shell of a man, and it sounded almost identical to what you had happen to you. So there you go. Take from what will you guys, or leave it. But everybody's got something to share that might help somebody. That would scare the shit out of me. Olympic Mountains, Moab, and Mount Shasta Sasquatch encounters. Hi Steve, I just started watching your channel about a week ago. I searched for Bigfoot and Sasquatch info constantly on YouTube, and I'm surprised how long it took for your channel to show up in my searches. Just shows how much we are censored from info right now, even when it's through the search engines. Anyways, for my background, I'm almost 50 now, and my first encounters with these beings that I can remember started in the 80s in Washington State. I spent my whole life fishing wherever and whenever possible. I'm a salmon, trout, and black bass guy. I haven't hunted. Just out of respect for what I think are majestic animals doesn't mean I'll never hunt, but most of my outdoor fishing friends do hunt, and almost always are carrying a sidearm when we're outdoors. I've been on successful gold digs, Been in a situation where me and my family were being tracked by a bear in the snow, chased by a mountain lion on my mountain bike, etc. Around a normal animal, I've never experienced fear or the sixth sense like I have when I'm around these things. One time up in the Sierra Mountains at Blue Lake, California, I had the hair standing up on my back and whole body while I was fishing a dock on the darkest area of the lake. I was night fishing. I've night fished about twice as much as I've day fished. I had to walk past this thicket of trees that was freaking me out. My family and I had rented a cabin there multiple times, but this was such a weird feeling. As I've listened to you reading these stories, it forced me to, for once, to write out these events in chronological order. Also, I've been an artist my whole life, from professional sculptor to digital effects supervisor. Right now I run a company involved in the surfboard industry in Southern California. I had my own skateboard company and snowboard factory in the 90s. I've mostly always felt free and very proud of what I do and how I live my life. This might be another factor in why the Bigfoot beings are attracted to me. It's just a hunch, though. I carry myself confidently, and I know it rubs haters the wrong way. Like they are mad that I'm naturally comfortable with myself and most other people, especially when they're trying to be intimidating. My dad was a boxer and would explain how your body language in calm state was more intimidating than jumping around, freaking out, and overreacting. That's true. I've always tried to stay as calm as possible around these beings when I know one is close. So, July 1986, Olympic Mountains, a remote high-altitude lake that is about a 30-mile, 2-day hike from Hurricane Ridge. I came from a split family, and every summer my sister and I were sent from San Diego to Bremerton, Washington to live with my grandparents during the summer. I spent my summer days running around the woods with my bow, wrist rocket or .22 rifle when we weren't forced to garden or can food. Fishing with my grandpa in the local lakes and in the Puget Sound for salmon and trout are some of the fondest memories of my life. My grandparents had 2 properties next to each other that were about 10 acres each in Bremerton, Washington. I felt like I was being watched sometimes, and I witnessed a tree fall very close to me while I was catching snakes back there in the woods one time. I only mention this because now I question so many times that I thought these things were around me, but I tried to ignore it, not be scared, keep fishing. When I was a boy, I stood out. I had platinum blonde hair, so it might have been why they were originally attracted to me. I just stood out. In July of '86, while me and my sister were staying for the summer in Washington State, my Aunt Annie, who was very fond of me, told me her boyfriend wanted me to go on a 60-mile hike in the Olympic Mountains. This would be for 2 weeks trout fishing with him and his son, who was 11 and also loved to fish. And I was 15 at this time. It was a 30-mile hike to the lake. This guy was cool to me. I looked up to him, and his dogs loved me. Didn't take them on this trip, though. He was a woodsman teacher, drove a Jeep Wrangler and a badass Mustang. So I said, hell yeah. My grandpa was very worried about me going because I had asthma attacks almost daily, and we were going over the timberline. This was around the time that Primatine Mist came out and allowed me to start playing soccer, skateboard, surf, and everything. I was never able to do for more than a few minutes, so I had this necklace for it and decided it was good to go. My grandmother told me that some people had died up there recently on Hurricane Ridge, our starting point, from lightning, and to be careful crossing the glacier with 60 pounds of gear on. We drove all day in the Jeep to the end of a dirt road high up in the Olympic Mountains, signed out to be gone for 2 weeks, and started heading up the path, the timberline. When we left, it was around 4 p.m. in the afternoon, clear skies, and we had about 3 hours of hiking to get up to the timberline before it was dark. My uncle wanted to get us over the ridge and come back down into the woods below the tree line on the other side, set up the first camp. My legs were overdeveloped from skateboarding, so I handled the hike pretty well, but my little step-cousin wasn't keeping up easily. Both my uncle and I had to keep taking items off his pack and put them on ours until they could keep up. By the time we figured this out, we were close to the ridge, and a huge storm had moved in. It was July and nice out when we started, but now the pouring rain was turning from water to sleet, then to snow. The wind was insane. My ears hurt. It was cold. All of us had flashlights, but they didn't do shit. There were so many times that I thought I lost the trail and couldn't see the person's feet in front of me. We stayed as close as we could and started picking up some real pace. The three of us were on a long trail that ran across the ridge before we could drop down, and lightning started going off more and more frequently. It was so snowy that we couldn't tell how far the bolts were from us, but every lighted up moment matched with the thunderclaps almost exactly. We were the tallest things on that ridge, and my uncle was just screaming at us like, "We have to get the F over this, quick! Don't effing stop! This is not a drill, go, go!" We weren't hurt at all by his urgency. We'd all gotten lectures about lightning from the grandparents, and I'd say after about 4 to 6 hours of this, we had gotten over the ridge, although I almost walked off the side of a couple of switchbacks, and steep-ass cliffs in the whiteout. The wind was much softer on the other side once we got over the ridge. With about an hour and a half of getting over the top, my uncle somehow got us back down into the trees below the timberline. It was still snowing pretty hard, so my uncle declared camp, strung the food up on a rope, and we pulled out our sleeping bags to get some sleep. I figured it was around 2 a.m. in the morning at this point. When I unrolled my sleeping bag, I quickly found out that it was not waterproof and soaked all the way through. Oh no. My pants and shoes were frozen. I couldn't feel my feet anymore. I truly thought I was going to freeze to death in my sleep, but I was so tired that I couldn't stay awake any longer. When I woke the next morning, I was huddled in the darkness, deep in my soaking wet but now very warm sleeping bag, and I could hear the faint sound of my name being called from a distance by my uncle and my cousin. It sounded like they were looking for me. At first I could not move, and this was my first experience with sleep paralysis. I could hear my breath wheezing, but all I could do was blink for a few minutes. I finally started to get my toes to move, and then everything else. I sat up, looked out my sleeping bag, and I didn't know why I was where I was. My first asthma attack was on me, and I was wheezing hard, and I had placed my Primatine mist in my backpack because my necklace string had frozen and broke the night before, and I couldn't cry out to let them know where I was. I was screaming, but my voice wouldn't do more than crack my dry throat and hiss. The sky was sunny and blue, snow was everywhere, and there was a trail where my sleeping bag had made a slide mark that went down a very steep hill, turning around rocks and trees and shit, across a little flat area, and then up onto a little plateau about 40 to 50 yards from where I was originally sleeping. Wow. At that time, I thought I just slid down the cliff in my sleep, perfectly making it around everything, and my momentum must have just carried me that far. I didn't see our camp when we set up because of snow and darkness, but I had a general idea of the terrain that I fell asleep on, and was very aware that I was next to a cliff-type situation. I just didn't know how steep it was. I slept in a bunk bed in California and never fell out. I slept in the crooks of trees a couple of times when I was younger. At first I thought I might have slid a quarter mile or more away from the camp, but the faintness of my cousin's voice... At first I thought I might have slid a quarter mile or more away from camp by the faintness of my cousin's voice. I grabbed my wet sleeping bag and started following the slide trail down and back up the hill to follow it back to camp. And after a minute or two of walking, I spotted my cousin's head about 30 feet up go by as he was frantically screaming my name out. When I saw the slide trail my sleeping bag had made, I couldn't believe I survived the ride down the steep embankment that dropped about 30 feet almost straight down and didn't even wake up. I'm smart with physics and geometry. I scored second highest in the state for geometry in California in '99. Although this was 2 years previous to that, I was a pretty bright child. I snowboard now, off-road, and understand how things slide in snow, but at the time I thought I must have melted the ice under me very slowly. I must have snaked between rocks and bushes down the hill, but it wouldn't have given me the speed to get across the flat area and up onto a rock another 25 yards or so away. I thought I was going to freeze to death, so I was happy to be alive. And after the events that were about to start happening to me, starting with the next few weeks, and what I know and have experienced now, I believe I might have been dragged in my sleeping bag by a Sasquatch, and possibly kept warm. That it used the slide mark of the sleeping bag to possibly cover its tracks. When I stumbled back into camp, I went straight for my backpack, found my inhaler, and took it. My uncle gave me a lecture about the boy who cried wolf, and he was under the impression that I was trying to play a joke on them and hide in the woods. And I showed him the weird trail my sleeping bag had made, and they thought I was trying to use it as a sled, chuckling weirdly. I told them I woke up down there, and that's when I got the big lecture. We packed up and spent the rest of the day hiking to the lake, and I felt bad that they thought I was trying to scare them. On the way to the lake, the deer, chipmunk, squirrels didn't seem like they had seen people before. The deer would walk with us down the trail at times and even take a nibble at our backpacks. Chipmunks would almost be sitting in my lap when I sat down. The whole time we were gone, we saw 3 humans. 2 were an older couple hiking out of the park when we got to the lake, and the forest ranger, a middle-aged woman, checked on us one day. That was it. At first. My uncle taught us how to catch trout by hand, dipping our heads in the stream to see the trout under the stream's icy edges, then punch a hole through the top and grab one. Besides the hypothermia risk, it worked, but I ended up spoon fishing the majority of the trout that we ate. We packed a couple dozen eggs and flour, and we were set up to stay if fishing was good. We showed up to the lake in that evening. My uncle set up the tarp tent right at the stream entrance to the lake on the shore, had a rifle, so I wasn't really scared of a bear or moose attack at that time in my life. I figured we had a gun, we're going to be okay if there's a problem. He started a fire, and we met a couple that was hiking out from the right side of the lake. A little interesting now that I look back that they were leaving right before nightfall in such a long hike. My uncle had made us some pancakes on the fire, and that's when the little rocks started being thrown into our camp. We could hear footsteps just outside the edge of the light of the fire starting after sundown. I didn't think anything of it. I thought more hikers might have shown up to camp, and maybe one of their kids was messing with us. I remember laying down and looking out the tarp at the skyline and seeing silhouettes of what I thought were a group of very tall black hikers walking by our camp, and I thought they were wearing expensive real fur hooded snow outfits. I noticed that they didn't have any backpacks on when they walked by, and that I decided they must have already set up camp on the right side of the lake because they were headed that way. My uncle must have been awake to see this. He wouldn't let his son out of his sight the entire time we were there. I caught all the fish by myself, but would not go on the right shady side of the lake the entire time I was there. It's unusual for me to not walk a lake like that, but I felt it was too dark on the shaded side and something might happen over there. I fished the sunny side with my back to a heavily wooded hill, and rocks kept going over my head and into the lake while I was spoon fishing for trout. I remember I kept looking at the hill to see what these rocks were bouncing off to get on upwards trajectory and go over my head. Still at this point, I would fish as long as I could with the hair standing up on the back of my neck until I couldn't stand it any longer and left back to camp. I knew if I stopped catching fish, we'd have to leave, so I wanted every brook trout I could get. They are small at that height of elevation, but practically scaleless and one of the easiest fishes to clean, cook, and eat. One night about 10 p.m., we started hearing all these tree branches breaking and shit on the right side of the lake, and about 30 to 40 yards to the side of us. I could hear heavy breathing, rocks sliding around, and what sounded like a tree being bent and starting to break. We had already had some little pebbles pinging off the rocks of our fire rink, and I knew that what was probably making all the commotion. I knew if I asked that my uncle would say no. So I lunged for a big spotlight that my uncle was already seeing. My eye pointed towards the sound and flipped the light on full blast. What I saw would haunt me forever, trying to figure out what the F I was looking at. The light hit the backside of what looked similar to a hairy man's giant ass and legs, slowly lumbering up the loose rock shoal, sliding rocks, and it looked like it was grabbing the tree to its side to get his weight up the crumbling hill, but moving slowly, and didn't stop moving when I shined the light on its ass and legs. My uncle pounced at me, grabbing the light out of my hands and shutting it off immediately. "Don't do that, they will attack," he whispered loudly. He said it was a moose, but this thing's ass was like 8 or 10 feet high and no tail. Way too much girth to be a moose. It was absolutely mammoth. The other ones I had seen from the tent were either way younger or a different species entirely. This thing was about 30 yards away, and the spotlight beam didn't even cover hardly half its body. I remember its back muscles, how they went straight up. And I've tried to make this a moose in my head for half my life, but never could figure out the no-tail thing and what I thought were huge feet with human heels sliding on the rocks, and why its back was straight up. The hair in the big one was probably 6 inches long, reddish blonde brown. I could see through the different parts all the way to its muscles on its back. When we were hiking out of there, we were followed by a series of very loud, startling tree knocks all the way to the glacier before we had to head back to up to the switchbacks. I've heard them on a few occasions now, but at this time in my life, I couldn't figure out how they were so loud, who the hell was doing it and why. I wandered off the trail about 20 feet and started trying to duplicate the sound of one of the trees with my walking stick, but the vibrations would just buzz it out of my hands if I hit my hardest against a tree. My uncle came tearing out of nowhere at this point, grabbing me and telling me not to hit the tree. We hear a series of loud roars I thought were grizzly howls, and my uncle made us wait under a tree with his rifle on his lap for about an hour. Once the sounds let up, we made it to the ridge. There was no more incidents or that watched feeling. I've thought of that image in my mind of the giant climbing the rocky hill. I've watched elk with their front hooves on a tree, climbing for a branch, and tried to make the connection that I saw pulling on that tree was a moose. It was so big. I always thought of the hairy monster from the Wild Things Live kid book. It was just frickin' massive. When I was looking at it, I was thinking about how weird I felt about that side of the lake and how I avoided it. I randomly had heard some voices back there in the daytime, and I thought it was possibly the weird campers who showed up in the moonlight. Might have already had a camp set up back in the trees, but at night there was no fires, no light from that area, as if they were just up chatting in the dark. It freaked me out. All right, so believe it or not, I'm only halfway through this email, and I'm going to take a screenshot of where I'm leaving off because I got to get going, you guys. I have got to go. I got to hike to the truck, drive out, drive back to town, find my parking, get up to my room, shower, get changed, walk out of the room, rip across town on foot, and find this place and go to this wedding. What a typical dude, right? If Sarah was here, she wouldn't let me do this for sure. She'd be like, there's not enough time. So there you go. Wow, the bugs are pretty bad. I love it in here. God, I love it in here so much. This is my place, one of them. I'll resume this later on, you guys, all right? Resume later on, for sure. I think it's this one wedding part's at 1 o'clock, then it goes on for a bit, then there's a break. So maybe maybe I can finish this up after the first segment of the day. Who knows, we'll see. I'll be back shortly, you guys.